And welcome to the trade. Before we get into the charts, let's take a look at what happened overnight on Wall Street. And in fact, oil prices climbing and conflicting signals over a deal to end the war in the Middle East. President Trump saying those talks are continuing and Iran is reviewing a proposed agreement. Momentum slowing on Wall Street, but still that record run continuing with the majors closing modestly higher. Stocks specifically, strong results from Hewlett Packard and a funding commitment from Alphabet reinforced confidence in the AI build out. Those Hewlett Packard shares are rocketing. More than or close to 20%. Alphabet saying it's looking to raise $80 billion in equity offerings. Elsewhere, Palo Alto Networks, those shares rose more than 7% after the close on its adjusted forecast for earnings. And Marvell Technology shares surging after Nvidia Chief Executive Jensen Huang called the chipmaker the next trillion-dollar company. And shares of Virgin Galactic, they crashed back to earth after soaring more than 200% over the past 2 weeks. And a quick look at those crypto-related stocks which have taken a tumble as the Bitcoin price also falls heavily. Let's now get to the technicals, and to do that we are joined by Chris Weston from Pepperstone. Chris, welcome back to you.
Good morning.
Oil remains front and centre. We did see a bit of a bump overnight. Conflicting reports out of the Middle East as to where we're at as far as the deal is concerned. But crucially, of course, the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. More reports of missile attacks too by Iran. What are you seeing on the chart at the moment for Brent?
Well, if you look at front month, I've got the CFD chart there. You can see that we've seen good support coming down into the lows that we saw between February through April around 91.40. We've seen a bit of a bounce back up. I think people have been taking off some of those bearish bets. It's been a strong downtrend of late. Momentum has been down to the downside. Obviously, as we went through last week, there was a continued sort of drip feed in the trajectory towards a memorandum of understanding. Obviously, the nuclear side was very much front and centre within that agreement, and that was a sticking point. But there was certainly a belief that we could see on confirmation of a memorandum of understanding that we could see a normalisation of the Straits of Hormuz. Now that would take a bit of time to come back. There's obviously mines and various factors which would need to be cleared, and production would need to come back online. But there was certainly a strong will from the shipping companies to get back to full business. And so we'd sort of gone into the weekend thinking that it was more likely than not that something was going to be announced, and obviously that hasn't happened. We've seen these news coming through today that there's been different missile attacks, different countries, and that's frustrated those short positions. So I think we've seen a lot of people closing some of those trades, and it's brought back this idea about the physical market and the shortages we're seeing in inventories, which have been drawn down pretty sharply of late. Now, if the Straits continues to be closed for a period of time, then that physical shortages will come back in, and we could see higher crude prices coming through. And I think a lot of people, which you can't see in the chart, but a lot of people will be trading that through prompt spreads by going along front month futures and shorting, say January, for example, the futures contract there, and looking for a widening and buying volatility as well. But right now you have seen a bit of a move back up to say $97 in front month Brent. It's not troubling markets too much. We're not seeing too much of a rise in inflation expectations on that, but obviously people are still watching, and I guess the various news flow on missile attacks today does distance the idea that an MOU is coming, in the short term. Although Trump is saying that it could still come this week, but I think just a few short bets just coming off the table here.
All right, that's how it's playing out for oil. Now let's turn to equities, Chris, with a view of the Nasdaq. And I'm trying to think of a day when there wasn't a new record taken out essentially on Wall Street, led by the three majors. So tell us, what are the trends that you're seeing on the Nasdaq at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it just keeps going up and up and up, doesn't it? And I mean, whilst we haven't got the S&P chart, the S&P's up 9 weeks in a row now. So we haven't had a 10th consecutive week in terms of that form since 1985. So it just goes to show the momentum that you can see, and the Nasdaq's obviously been the outperformer this year. Japan as well is in the Nikkei has been an absolute superstar. But what we're seeing again is just really this rotation within the AI thematic, and you see these big moves in some of the memory stocks that sort of goes on the back burner. We get hardware coming through like Dell, That's been absolutely smashing it recently because they're executing absolutely brilliantly, and they're very much in the right space, and their earnings were really good. We saw Marvell coming out last night; the stock was up 32%. So they're not small gains; they're proper grown-up size moves. And you've seen pretty much every tech stock in the S&P beating expectations by some margin, and it just reinforces the idea that earnings growth is coming through. Analysts have had to revise up their forecast for the full year, and that's lowered the multiple on some of these names. So, this is the hot space, and people are trying to price the risk of cash flows further down the line, earnings, and we've got so much momentum and systematic funds chasing these stocks higher. But as I say, the positive situation is we usually talk about rotation within the broader equity market between sectors, themes, and styles. And actually what we're seeing now is just the AI thematic, the broad thematic. We go into one space and we might go into the chips, the semis, and then that sort of gets a bit hot, and then we rotate into hardware, semi-analog, and those kind of names, and it just all becomes this big sort of rotation, perpetual move higher. But that's where the fund flows are going at the moment. So where does it end? I don't know. I guess if we were to see an MOU being signed between Iran and the US, and crude prices were to go lower, maybe that can incentivize people into more sort of cyclical areas of the market as opposed to these defensive momentum names that we've been seeing in AI. But for now, it's hot. Is it too hot? I don't know. I think the market continues to want to buy dips, and I think the space continues to rally for the short term.
And finally, Chris, let's turn to Bitcoin. Now, most notably, over the past couple of sessions, it's taken a big leg lower. What's going on there at the moment? Why is sentiment so negative? What are the technicals telling you?
Well, the technicals are telling me that it's in a downtrend at the moment. I think when you look at a chart, you really all you're doing is you're making a probabilistic outcome of where the distribution of potential outcomes can be, and obviously you can't go out and say, look, we've got big support levels at 64,500. Can we get down to those levels? Obviously, I don't know, but given the way that the market's trading at the moment, the buyers are stepping out. We're getting leveraged long positions are getting cut up, and that it does feel that rallies are to be sold, and there's further downside in store. And I think part of this is just there's a finite amount of capital fighting. The markets are fighting for a finite amount of capital and out there. And right now, if you're looking at something that's a high momentum, high risk vehicle, well, do you really want to go into crypto and Bitcoin specifically here? But when you can go out and buy Dell, which is absolutely blowing up, HP, the Marvell, all these names are absolutely flying, and they're working. So, if I want to take the risk and I'll go to something that the market's already rewarding and actually is in a really strong, hot thematic. Now, Michael Saylor did also sell some Bitcoin yesterday or recently. He announced it. I don't think that's necessarily going to surprise, because he did announce at his last earnings call that they may look to do that, and that's sort of broken away from something they haven't done really since 2022. But it is symbolic. I mean, they sold 32 Bitcoin, which for an entity that has 843 Bitcoins, it's a rounding error. It's chump change effectively, but it is symbolic, and I think it just sort of compounds a market that just doesn't have many catalysts, and investors and traders are looking at things that are working, and they want to be leveraged to things that are working and not things that are going in a downtrend. So the path of least resistance at the moment is lower, it seems, and my bet, as I talk about quite often in terms of crypto, it is a fantastic momentum vehicle. Momentum is to the downside, so I wouldn't be buying the dip. I'd be waiting for others to do that for me, and I'll be buying the rip after the dip and let the market continue to show that it's ready to make a move higher.
Chris, always great to get across those technicals that you're seeing. Thanks so much for joining us at Pepperstone.
Pleasure. Thanks, mate.
And that is The Trade.